Thank you guys for tuning in. I am your host, Luis G, and this is The Howl. And tonight, I don't want to talk about geopolitics too much. I want to mainly focus on what is going on with the diesel and the gasoline situation as this conflict with Iran and everything drags on. And I want to talk specifically about what's going to happen here in the continental US. I'm going to mention the war in Iran only briefly and not really to debate it, but because the market takes a toll fast. And whether you love politics or hate them, the fuel island doesn't care. The fuel island only cares about supply, demand, refining, and panic. So this is a trucking episode, a fleet episode, an owner operator episode. So let's just talk fuel like professionals. So let's talk about where we are right now. Not rumors, only numbers. The US Energy Information Administration, or the EIA, weekly report shows that the U.S. average are pricing the regular gas at $3 per gallon and the highway diesel at $3.89 per gallon. Now, here's the part that drivers actually feel: the regional gaps. On that same EIA report, the diesel by region is roughly Gulf Coast at 350 a gallon, Midwest 388, the East Coast 390, Rocky Mountain at 373, and the West Coast at a whopping almost $5 a gallon. And gasoline is doing what gasoline does. The West Coast stays high, and the rest of the country, it's at $3 a gallon, which is not bad. So when somebody says the fuel is up, you have to ask them where, because the country doesn't buy fuel at one price or in one region. A truck in Louisiana is not feeling the same truck reality as in California. Like, a lot of drivers hate going to California, not because of the speed limit, but because the fuel prices are so high, and the market is not necessarily good enough to make it there. If I can read to you a little piece of the EIA report, it says here that the routers reported diesel has already pushed over $4 per gallon in the US as the conflict premium hit hard, with analysis warning it could push into the 425 or 445 if the situation worsens. And that's not fear. That's just the market telling you what is pricing in. Now, here's the key point of tonight's episode. Diesel doesn't move like gasoline. Gasoline is a consumer problem. Diesel is an economic bloodstream problem. When diesel climbs, it hits freight, farming, construction, manufacturing, everything delivered. And the diesel can spike harder than gasoline when the inventories are tight. The EIA Weekly Petroleum Report shows that the inventory is at 120 million barrels, about 3% below the 5-year average for this time of the year. And that matters because when inventory is thin, any new disruption becomes a price amplifier. And at the same time, that same EIA shows gasoline inventories were about 4% above the 5-year average. So the market is basically saying gasoline is okay-ish and diesel is tight. And that is why the trucking industry feels it faster, because we have to factor in that we need to put fuel in the truck today in order to make our deliveries. But what if there is a problem down the line that we won't have available diesel or enough capital to put diesel in the tanks? And this is particularly bad for owner operators who are just, owning one truck or maybe two trucks. They don't have the available resources to keep this going for an extended period of time. And if this situation keeps getting worse, the market is going to squeeze even more because there's not going to be enough supply, and the price is just going to keep spiking up. So let's talk about what to expect if this drags on. And I'm going to give you a practical framework instead of pretending I can predict the future. Now, when we come back from this little break, we want to continue talking about the situation and also another topic that we haven't touched on, Venezuela. That's another big issue that a lot of people think it might help us out with the fuel prices, but it's not a guarantee. We'll talk more as we come back. So even if I only mention Iran briefly, the market is pricing Middle East risk into crude and refined products. I mean, the routers and other major outlets are already reporting disruption shipping conditions and other knock-on affected into the fuel prices. All right, so the big question is, what happens next? And I'm going to keep this simple because fuel doesn't move on feelings. It moves based on three things. It moves on oil risk, diesel. Well, the first one is oil risk, which equals fuel price pressure. When there's trouble overseas, the markets put what is called a risk premium. And that's just a fancy way of saying there might be disruptions, so price have to go up. So as long as there is a conflict, the fuel can stay elevated because the market is pricing danger, delays, and uncertainty. The second thing is that diesel is tight in the US. This part matters most to truckers because diesel can jump faster than gas when its supply is tight. And right now, the EIA data shows that the diesel is running below normal, which basically means that we have less of a cushion. And less cushion means this: if something goes wrong, prices spike quicker and stay up longer. And the third thing is that the refinery season is coming. Every year, refineries do maintenance and switch to seasonal production. That can cause temporary tightening, especially if something else is already pushing prices up, like a war in Iran, perhaps. So even if crude oil isn't missing, you can still get higher prices if refining and distribution get tight. So what should you expect if this drags on? Here's what I would expect realistically: more price swings. You'll see fuel jump up, drop a little, then jump again, and that's just volatility. Now, diesel stays stubborn. Gas can move, but diesel tends to stay a little bit higher when supply chain is tight. Now, different regions feel it differently. The Gulf Coast can be cheaper. The West Coast usually stays pretty high, and shocks can hit everybody at once. And I want to say this clearly, guys. You don't need oil to hit $100 to feel pain in trucking. You feel pain when diesel rises faster than the freight charges. That's when margins get crushed. There are already reports that diesel can move over $4 a gallon, and analysis are warning about higher ranges if the situation worsens. Now, let's talk about something else that matters: Venezuela, because this is another piece that matters to the fuel prices here in the continental US, especially down on the Gulf Coast. Here's the simple truth: a lot of refineries on the Gulf Coast are built to process heavy crude, but not all oil is the same. Some oil is lighter, some is heavier. And a lot of US refineries, especially in that region, are designed to run the heavier stuff. And Venezuela produces heavy crude. So what's changed recently? Well, basically, the US has allowed Venezuelan oil to move through more approved channels than before. That means more legal transactions, more trading, more activity, and more barrels being allowed into the system under certain rules. And we already see it show up in the numbers. I mean, the numbers already went way up to around 400,000 barrels per day in 1 week, which was the highest level in about a year. Now, here's the catch. This is important. Even if Venezuela sends more oil, that does not mean that automatically the prices at the pump are going to drop. And why? Because oil is priced in a global market, and the price you pay depends on refining costs, transportation, regional supply, and of course, demand. And on top of that, Venezuela is still a complicated situation. Their production, contracts, and politics can change fast. And that uncertainty makes it hard to count on Venezuela as a steady solution. So my takeaway is this: Venezuela can help, yes, but it's not magic. Think of Venezuela like a pressure release valve. It might soften the spike. It might keep things from getting worse, but it's not guaranteed that diesel suddenly falls back down. And if the global risk premium stays high, even extra barrels don't feel like cheap fuel. Sometimes they just keep you from getting crushed. Now let's talk a little bit about survival. Real decisions you can actually make while fuel is jumping around. Stop pricing lows like fuel is stable. If you're quoting freight like diesel is going to sit still, you're already behind, guys. Now, here's what discipline looks like. You guys have to update your numbers weekly, know what your fuel surcharge is going to be. If you're mostly spot market, you need to move faster. Then you need to update your numbers weekly and know what your fuel surcharge is going to be. If you're really mostly spot market, you need faster repricing, period. Now, you need to know a few things, guys. Your MPGs, how much idle time you're burning, reefer fuel if you're running a reefer, your route types, for example, mountains versus the flats, and of course, the deadhead versus the loaded miles. Because when diesel goes from 390 to 440, your cost per mile changes, and you can't wish that away. Now, what you should be doing is fixing your inefficiencies before chasing more revenue. This is where pros win. You need to cut your deadhead when you can, reduce idle, plan trips tighter, stay on tire pressure, stop fueling at the worst positions you can, stop fueling at the worst stations just out of habit. When fuel climbs, small waste can become big money. You need to treat fuel volatility like a contract issue. If you're a small carrier with direct customers, make sure your agreements allows fuel adjustments. If you're a broker, you need to be willing to walk away from loads that don't pay reality. You also need to watch the right weekly indicators. Keep it simple, guys. Check weekly diesel prices, watch diesel supply levels and how hard refineries are running. When diesel supply is tight, diesel stays nasty. Now, fuel is not just an expense, guys, it's a strategic problem. And if you treat it like just a cost, it will eat you alive. So, wrapping this up, diesel is already high and it can still climb if this drags on. Diesel supply is still tighter than normal, which make prices more sensitive to bad news. Now, Venezuela may add some relief with heavy crude, but it's not a guarantee of cheap fuel, and it comes with uncertainty. So my conclusion is not to panic. My conclusion is to prepare. You got to stay on top of your news, stay on top of the market situations, see where the prices are going to be tomorrow, a week from tomorrow. Just remember, guys, knowing is half the battle. And thank you so much for tuning in. You were listening to The How. I'm your host, Luis G. And if this helped you, don't forget to subscribe and share with somebody who drives as well. It may help them as well. And if you want to connect with us, you can go to our website, www.twinwolfunited.com, or call 866-238-9537. God bless you all, and God bless America. Goodbye. Thank you guys for tuning in one more time. This is The How. I am your host, Luis G. And if you like our content, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It really helps us out. All right, Wolves, let's talk about something real. The fuel is up, and when fuel is up, the next question is simple. Are your rates keeping up? Because fuel can rise fast, but freight rates don't always rise fast. That's the problem, right? And that gap right there can easily destroy a small carrier or an owner operator. So I want to break this down in a simple way. First of all, what is the spot freight? And this spot freight is very simple. It's a load that you grab right now, that you grab it today. No long contracts, and there's no guarantee that you're going to get the same load next week. Just here's the load, and here's the rate. Now, spot is flexible and spot can be very fast, but the problem is that spot can also be very brutal. Now, what is contract rate? Now, contract freight is more stable. You have an agreement, you have a relationship. Usually you have a repeat lanes that you can repeat every week or consistently, maybe once a day even. It all depends on your client. It is also something that you work to get. It's not something that you just land on same day. Now, sometimes it may pay a little bit less, but when the fuel is crazy high, a contract protects you. Now, here's what happens when fuel jumps. Now, the fuel goes up today, right? But the rate you're offered is still built on yesterday's fuel prices. So that's the biggest problem that a lot of carriers face. So you basically end up hauling freight with old prices while paying for new prices. And that is how people go broke while working. Now, I'm going to say this clearly, guys. Listen to this. A load that keeps you moving can still be a losing load. Movement is never just profit. It doesn't automatically mean profit. Now, when diesel spikes, spot markets often do this. Brokers try to hold the rates down. Shippers complain and move slow. Everybody wants you to help them out. And they tell you, it's only temporary. You know, we're going to get through this. It's just for today. But the reality is that the fuel bill is today. It's not temporary. It's real. So here's the biggest trap. You look at the load and think, at least it's paying me something. But when you do the real math, you realize that it's a completely losing load. It basically pays something, but in reality, it pays you nothing because you still have to pay for fuel. You still have to pay for your bills. You have to permits. Any in 1,000 things can come up. You blow a tire, where is that gonna come from? Now, contract freight is usually slower to change, but it can be more predictable. Some contracts have fuel programs, some have surcharges, some have built-in ways to adjust. Not all, but some. The big advantage is this. You're not renegotiating every single load like a street deal. The people who get hurt the most are usually owner operators, small fleets, anyone running mostly spot, anyone who doesn't really reprice fast. Because in a fuel spike, you need to move fast. You need speed. Not speed on the highway, speed on the pricing. You need to be on top of it. Now, before you book a load during a fuel spike, you need to ask these three things. What is the fuel cost per mile? Not last month, but today. What is it today? How much deadhead will you have to run? Because deadhead on a fuel spike can be double the price. And the last question is, does this load still leave me a margin? Not will it cover expenses? No. I'm talking about, will it leave a profit, a margin? Now, if the answer is no to any of these, don't lie to yourself, guys. That load is just not right. And if it's not right, you shouldn't be doing it. Now, here's what professional operators do. They raise the minimums. They don't wait. They set a rule. They set rules like, I'm not moving for less than X per mile on this lane. And they stick to it. They have to stick to it. That's how they keep their margins and their profits going. Because if you keep accepting cheap freight, you're basically telling the market that you'll work for cheap. And nobody wants to do that. Now, here's the line I really want you to remember, guys. Don't haul cheap freight on expensive diesel. That's the whole lesson for today, okay? Let's repeat that. Don't haul cheap freight on expensive diesel, period. Now, guys, now that we know that we should never haul cheap freight on expensive diesel, if fuel is climbing and swinging, here's a simple approach. If you have good contract lanes, you have to protect them. That's number one. Use spot carefully and only when the numbers are real. Don't take a spot load just because you're bored. We can wait. And never take a load just because you need to stay busy. Sometimes it's better to be patient and wait for the good, proper load. Remember, busy can still mean broke. Now, spot is not necessarily bad, and contracts are not perfect. You know, I'm never going to say that the contracts are perfect. But during the fuel spikes, the spot can punish you faster, and contracts can keep you alive. And the operator who survives is the one who prices out the loads like a professional, like a business. Now, let's talk about something that you can actually control, because you can't control government, you can't control the fuel prices, and you can't control world events, you know, but you can definitely control how much fuel you're burning. So I'm going to give you a little quick fuel saving checklist that you can do. Not complicated, just real. Stop idling so much. That will be number one. You know, idling is a silent thief. If you idle for 1 hour per day, just 1 hour, which is really nothing, that truck is going to burn 1 gallon that hour, and it adds up. So here's a little simple goal. Cut the idling at half. I know sometimes you have to idle if it's really hot, if it's really cold, but try, you know, to do things to help you with the idling time. For example, maybe step out of the truck and go inside the truck stop for a little bit. I mean, some truck stops have decent waiting areas and couches and TVs and whatnot, and that can really help your bottom line. Now, another thing that you can do is maybe slow down a little bit. Now, I'm not telling you to drive slow. I'm telling you to save fuel. When you push speed, the wind resistance goes up and fuel burns faster. Just a few different miles per hour can make a big difference in that fuel. So the simple rule is this: drive the speed that makes sense, not the speed that feels good. Now, another thing that a lot of drivers don't really pay a lot of attention to is the tire pressure. Low tire pressure burns fuel, and bad tire pressure also ruins the tires. So it's a double problem, not just the fuel, but also now you're spending money on new tires more often. So I know I probably shouldn't even have to say this to a lot of experienced drivers, but for you guys, the new rookies out there, you know, this is important. You have to check your tires weekly, fix slow leaks. Don't guess. Don't wait until it becomes a blowout. That's going to cost you way more money and downtime on top of it. Just remember, fuel savings and safety go together. This is a big one. Some drivers buy fuel at the same spots out of habit, just because they go there every time. But even when it's more expensive, a difference of 15 to 20 cents per gallon matters a whole lot. If you're buying thousands of gallons every week, so basically just fuel smarter. Plan where you fuel, use apps if you need to, compare prices, stop buying extra for no reason. Now, a big thing is to plan your trips like the fuel is expensive, because it is. It really is. I mean, fuel prices is not just the price. It also how you drive the trip. Traffic burns fuel. Stop and go burns fuel. Bad routes burn fuel. even the mountains. You have to pick the best route possible to save every gallon you can. So when fuel is high, the trip planning matters even more. A few things that you should try to avoid are the heavy highway traffic if possible, reduce the stop and go when you can. I mean, it's impossible to do it every single time. Reduce the unnecessary detours and reduce deadhead miles. That's the biggest one. No deadhead. Try to, as much as possible, not to do deadhead, and always calculate the deadhead into the rate of the load that you're getting. Every empty mile is a mile you paid for twice. Now, another thing is the maintenance of the truck. A truck can run, yes, it can run, and still be wasting fuel. Things can quickly wreck fuel economy. Bad alignments, brake drag, clogged filters, engine issues, sensor problems. These are just a few things that can burn your fuel very fast. So if we want to summarize that, basically maintenance is fuel savings. You don't have to be perfect, but you can't ignore problems when fuel is high. Now, for those of you who ride reefers, the reefer burns fuel too. And you have to be smart with it. Pre-cooling, door time, keeping seals tight, not running colder than it needs to be. The reefer fuel is easily ignored until you calculate it. So you have to stay on top of it as well. That's an extra engine you're carrying there. So the simple takeaway on fuel savings, when diesel is high and you have a fuel savings idea, it's not just savings. It's a pay raise you give to yourself, because that's money that comes back into your pocket. And the best part is you don't need anybody's permission to do it. You should just do it because you know that it's money that is going to come back to you without doing much effort. So basically, here's the full picture. On one side, we have the pricing, spot versus contracts, and not letting fuel spikes erase your profit. That's one side. Now, on the other side, you have the control, idle, speed, tires, fuels, planning, maintenance. If you do both, you don't just survive fuel volatility, but you stay in the game long enough to win when it comes down. So, all right, Wolves, I guess that's it for tonight. Now you have to stay sharp, stay safe and protect your livelihood, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Luis G with The Howl. Don't forget to subscribe. God bless you all. And most of all, God bless America. Thank you, guys.